This week's show with Tracy Franklin is sponsored by Sassy Jack Stitchery and Avlia Folk Embroidery. Kim and the folks at Sassy Jack's are getting ready to open their new forever home this fall, and it promises to be a destination store for needleworkers from all corners. In addition to all of the new charts that were introduced at Needlework Expo, be sure to check out the full collection of Sassafras Samplers charts, including Alice Ellen Usher 1873, Christian Henry 1816, and Elizabeth Cooper Jesus Wept. Many of the Sassafras charts are available as PDF downloads, and Kim will be happy to put together kits for all of them. Make Sassy Jack Stitchery your local needlework store by visiting the website at sassyjackstitchery.com and plan to visit when the new shop opens this fall. Also sponsoring this week's show is Avlia Folk Embroidery at avliaembroidery.com. Designer Krista West continues to generate a steady stream of top-notch cross-stitch and embroidery designs. Be sure to check out the new Grecian Griffins embroidery hoop kit and the beautiful Byzantine band sampler. You'll also want to put the Avlia work bag in your cart. It's a beautiful drawstring bag that you can embroider and then use to hold your travel project. Krista is now offering a full line of Appleton crewel wools and a large collection of beautiful needle minders and thread drops. Check it all out at avliaembroidery.com. Now, on to our conversation with Tracy Franklin. Welcome back. I'm Gary Parr.
And I'm Beth Ellicott.
And you're listening to Fiber Talk, the twice-weekly podcast for needlework artists. Our artist this week from the UK, Tracy Franklin. Tracy, welcome.
Hello.
Good to have you with us. Holy smokes, we've got so much to talk about here. It's going to take a day.
I'll speak quick.
No, don't speak quickly. All the time in the world. I was wondering, as we were doing the research, I mean, you're 10 years at the Royal School. And teaching and coordinating, and of course have the full certification and everything. And we've spoken to several graduates, and clearly you get out of there and you have such a broad and solid foundation in needlework of all kinds. When you left to be on your own, did that foundation give you? Obviously, I'm sure gave you a comfort zone. But did you stick with that? Do you still stick with what you learned there, or was it a branching off and finally I can go do what I want to do?
I approached the Royal School of Needlework about doing certain things like taking the certificate and diploma. Well, the diploma didn't exist then. The certificate to Durham, so branching out. So I already had the Batsford book, the Goldwork book. I was already doing that as well. And I was also teaching for a few Embroiderers Guild branches that were around at the time. So when I left, I got straight into that, and I was teaching. I did a bit of teaching for the Royal School of Needlework, but I actually went back to Hampton Court, and it was about a year later that we got the certificate off the ground, and I'm still teaching that today. So it was, there's a few things that I was able to do, and it just kind of expanded from there. I was quite lucky at the time because not many people from the Royal School of Needlework had really left and branched out. So I was kind of, I think I was quite unique on the market from that point of view, and more people have come out since from graduating from the Royal School of Needlework, so there's a bigger market of Royal School of Needlework people around. But I've always enjoyed doing other things. Like I really love textile arts as well. So I've always kind of dabbled in that side of thing. I don't really teach it, but I do kind of dabble in it. So yeah, I've taken some of the values of the Royal School of Needlework, but I think I've probably built on those as well. If that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it just strikes me like it's almost a split personality for you, because you still work with the Royal School, so you got to stick to the rules and regs, which there's nothing wrong with that. But then you also have this creative side where you just take off and go do your own thing.
Yeah, I do. I do. Yeah, and I really like that. I really like just dabbling and just pursuing different things all the time and just having a go if something doesn't work. I don't get disheartened too much, but I try and figure of another way of kind of developing it. And sometimes it'll work and sometimes it'll work later on. But when I left the Royal School of Needlework and I started teaching for all these Embroiderers Guild branches around the country, and they have their regional summer schools, spring schools, they invited other tutors which were textile artists. So I got to know them as well. So I was always really interested in what they did. So it's just, I've kind of followed those people too, which is quite different from the Royal School of Needlework. So I love both things, basically.
Yeah, I mean, you just take advantage of both sides of the world, and it's neat to see. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I try not to. I do. What I really like about the Royal School of Needlework learning and is the detail and the fine traditional techniques and the perfection of them. And you do kind of learn the basics at the Royal School of Needlework, but you probably refine it personally yourself in a different way. So even though we're trained the same way, we probably all have our slightly different approaches. And obviously, we're all different people anyway, so we're always going to like different things and enjoy different aspects of different types of needlework. So, but
Yeah.
I just love playing with technique all the time.
Yeah, it is a creative process, but above and beyond all the techniques, it's still creativity. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you always had that creative streak in you? I mean, from even as a child, has it always been art and creativity?
Yeah. I was always making various things. I had books given to me, Ladybird books. I don't know if you know of those. I still have the knitting and stitching and embroidery version. I was always kind of making things from those and making things for my dolls that I had at the time. And so, yeah, always kind of creating because my mum always kind of did a bit of stitching and her mother did. So I kind of it was just normal to me because I guess when you see somebody else doing it, it just seems like normal to do that. So you just carry on from where they started and just continued it yourself. It's
Yeah.
just that I've made it into a career as well.
Yeah. Now, Beth, there's that doll thing again. Doing needlework and sewing for dolls. It's who
Right.
was that we talked to that we were talking about the dolls and how that drives fashion. I forget who that was, but
Yeah,
most
that was the Mary Queen of Scots. But they used to have the dolls and they dressed them,
Okay.
but and then they passed them around. Now, who wrote the book? Oh, Claire Hunter. I
yes.
knew it would come. That was who.
Oh yeah. I've listened to some of her podcast actually. Yeah. Yeah, my mum always used to make me rag dolls and stuff. So I used to kind of, make little garments and that sort of thing for them as well, or made rag dolls as well. So
Hmm.
it just continuation. It just seemed normal to me to do that sort of thing. So, and I enjoyed it, and I still have all my old childhood books
Oh
that
boy.
I.
Yeah, but that's fun to go back and look at. I don't have any of that stuff. No. No. Is that what? How did you end up in fashion school? Was that really your first love? First, is that where you expected to be for a career?
When I was leaving school, I had a strong desire to work in theatre, and I just really wanted to do the detail on the costumes and that sort of thing. It was just a natural process for me to want to do that. And the careers officer, I don't know what it's like in schools today, but we had a careers officer come into the school, and she kind of helped us look at what we wanted to do, and So I spoke to her a lot, and she looked at places that I could maybe think of going to, and one of the places was Leeds. So I applied to go to Leeds because this careers officer helped me find a position. Um, and so I went to Leeds when I was 17 to do pattern cutting and garment construction, but it was kind of basically a platform or a step to do what I wanted to do, which was costume. So because I couldn't really just go into the costume because it was a much higher national diploma. So it was like basically I didn't do A levels. I don't know if you know that sort of side of our education system. So I had to do something else before I could go into a higher course, which was costume making, which I eventually did.
Oh, so you did get there then. Okay.
Yeah, London Culture Fashion. So I went from Leeds to London Culture Fashion to do costume making and worked in the industry a bit as well before I went to the Royal School of Needlework.
Was that fun? I mean, that seems like such a competitive world.
I guess it was. It's. I don't know if I faced competition as such, but I found it everything is needed immediately. So you have to. I worked for a freelance costume maker, and maybe it was her more than the field of costume making itself. I don't know, but we used to have to work through the night and stuff to get costumes made for a production or a film set or whatever. So it can be really hard work. I'm sure it is still uh, when you see a whole production together. So it is really it's and I was really young at the time, so it didn't really faze me to do that. But it's the only time in my life that I've ever really needed to work through the night. I've always managed to get to bed at some point, but working right the way through the night and then just continuing till about 4 o'clock the next day is
Oh,
just madness to me.
that'll burn you out in a hurry. Oh,
You can't stay awake. You just can't keep awake.
mm,
I couldn't anyway. I found it really hard going.
yeah.
It only
I
happened
think
once in a while.
I would think
Sorry.
that would take a certain personality to stay in that sort of very time driven, deadline driven business.
Yeah. The business I worked for, which was really good, it was really good grounding for me and everything. But basically, it was on in a complex where there were many other businesses, nothing necessarily costume or even film or TV related, but you just went into this unit inside a big building and worked there, and then went home, and that was it. So and it was and I loved the people I worked with. They were really nice. One of them went to college and was the year ahead of me, so it was good to have that person there as well. But it it's not really it's just very closed off. So you just see the same 5 people every day in a unit. It wasn't open enough. And I discovered the Royal School of Needlework while I was doing that anyway, so I applied there as well. I saw their apprenticeship advertised in a magazine and I thought, that sounds interesting. I'll give that a go.
Oh,
So
so literally an ad gets you to the Royal School then.
yeah. My grandmother used to buy magazines. She used to pass them on to my mum, and then I would read them. And I saw that ad in a magazine, and I already knew vaguely about the Royal School of Needlework because I'd been to a trade show, and they were there, and I'd picked up some stuff from their stand, not knowing at the time that they ran an apprenticeship. Um, and it just looked like it does for everybody. I've had other people say to me, I would have loved to have gone there, and it is very much like that. It just looks like the best place in a historic palace in a with embroidery to be stitched. It was a dream to go there. So yeah, I applied for it and I got a place before I was made redundant from the job that I was working in. So that worked out really well for me.
Time that one.
Yeah. So yeah, 1991, Royal School of Needlework.
What is that like to apply? Do you have to? What do you have to do? I mean, are you just interviewed, or do you have to show some work, or?
Yeah, I mean, eventually I was part of the panel that interviewed, but it never really changed. There was always a panel of people who were various people at the Royal School of Needlework, like the principal at the time and one of the tutors, etc., etc. So yeah, you had to take a portfolio of work, and you kind of showed them what you did, and they fired questions around. And they were very encouraging, as we were when I was on the panel as well. You just have to be interested in people and what their process is and what their aim of being there and that sort of thing. So yeah, it was a good interview, and I basically got a place to start about, because it was at something like it was before Christmas of 1990, but I got a place for 91 because I'd missed out on the 1990 place. So the next year I went. So I had a few months to kind of, do bits and pieces. And then I went to Royal School of Needlework after that.
One thing that has become clear with all the people we've talked to who've graduated in one form or another from the Royal School is if you go through one of their programs, certificate, diploma, whatever it is, by the time you're done, you without a doubt know whether you love needlework. I mean, I think all the techniques and all those things aside, it's very clear that if you get through all of that with all the hours and hours of stitching, it really determines whether you love it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there are things that I really wanted to learn, like silk shading and gold work, that you could never pick up from a book. It's something that you have to be shown and perfect and just do over and over and over again. So that was very much something that I really wanted to learn. I wanted to learn those techniques. Other things such as canvas work and crewel work, you could probably get away with learning basics of it, but you learn a lot more about it and the processes when you're at the Royal School of Needlework. And obviously each tutor has it. I said this before, each tutor kind of brings their own personal ways into it because they perfect it in a different way. So you definitely learn different things from different tutors, I think. I'd like to think that way anyway.
Yeah.
That speaks to taking classes. I think sometimes we think, oh, we can learn that from a book. But I think sometimes when you take the time to take a class, you learn something with the teacher that you wouldn't have learned just from going step by step through a book.
Yeah, it certainly fast tracks you into learning a bit more, because you learn, if you've got a really good tutor, and there were some brilliant tutors there, then you get to know their ways instantly, and you just pick that up. Just doing it from, because you learn all the details, and that's kind of what I was interested in, all the details of things and why and wherefore and how this works and why you don't do it this way, and just the right amount of pressure, etc., etc. It's just all the detail that I was trying to gain from the learning of different tutors as well, I would say.
You spent, 10 years there? At some point, I'm sure there's a comfort level at the Royal School. What is it that makes you say, all right, it's time to move on to a new phase?
Well, because it's in London, and I'm not from London, I'm from the north. That was part of it. Not that I necessarily wanted to come back home, but it was really nice to come back home. It's really nice to have a business in the north. It's really easy to get London anyway from the north. It was because I was an apprentice, and then I worked in the workroom for a while. Then I became the apprentice coordinator, and because it became much more of a management job, it kind of took away any creativity that I might have done, although it was really good to do that. But but I really wanted to just kind of create and stitch again rather than manage lots of people. And also, I'd never really wanted to be head of the Royal School of Needlework or anything like that. But I felt as though I went as far as I could, and then it was just time to. And I couldn't. I looked at other positions and other jobs and applied for other positions, but nothing really did it for me like the Royal School of Needlework did. So I thought, well, other people had left to kind of go freelance. So I thought, oh, well, I may as well give it a go. And if it doesn't work, I could always go back. There were more opportunities then, I guess. I mean, there might still be opportunities now, but I just had to try it, and it worked. For me, it worked. So.
And you got to go back home too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I still kind of went down there, and it was much more enjoyable. The other thing was like house prices, and it was like a personal thing. You can't. The house prices in London, especially, are just so much more than anywhere else. Well, city centres generally are quite high priced, and there was nowhere. Just living in a room in a shared house wasn't doing it for me anymore. So it had to end.
Right. Kind of needed your own space, more than just a little room.
Yeah, just sharing a kitchen with other people that you hadn't chosen to live next to, because you just in a shared house with the landlord brought various people in. I just needed my own space, my own kitchen, my own, all of that.
That'll drive you to make a change. Yep.
Yeah, it was a combination of things, and I just thought I'll just try it. I'll just do it, and it worked. I didn't really doubt that it wouldn't work, to be honest.
Yeah.
I thought it would work in some way, and also had the Goldwork book, kind of, because I met somebody who was kind of a headhunter for Batsford. So she asked me if I would be interested in doing this book, and that's how it all kind of came about. So I was very lucky, just in the right place at the right time.
So the Goldwork book was right about this time then of transition?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly when. I think it was probably in 1990 before I. No, it couldn't have been. Sorry, it was probably the year before I left. I left in 2001, so it was probably about 2000 that I got the Goldwork book. I did a talk for a group, and with two speakers, again a textile artist and myself, and she worked for Batsford. I think still does, because I'm still in touch with her. She did she just approached me because I was doing a talk on Goldwork and asked if I would be interested. And then it kind of went from there, really. So again, just in the right place at the right time. I'm sure it happens for many people, but it really worked for me on that day. So the Goldwork.
Yeah. I think we ought to interject here that your Goldwork book is not a Goldwork book like other Goldwork books I've seen. Now, I don't know personally, I don't own a copy, but I've been. It's now gone on my Christmas wish list for my children. So when they listen to this, they know what I want for Christmas. It's different. It's more contemporary.
Yeah. I wanted to make it a bit more contemporary. There wasn't many Goldwork books out at that point. There's many out now, but I think the only one that was out was Jane Lemon. And that was much more of a historical approach. And they actually reintroduced that after mine. I think that came out again. It was republished. And I can't really remember what else was out. There really wasn't that much. And Batsford have obviously got quite a good reputation of doing textile art embroidery books. They're still going strong. I'm still in touch with them a little bit. So they're always producing. Many of the books that I have are Batsford published. The best ones that I have are Batsford published.
Have you used them for your other two books too?
Yeah, the White Work one was Batsford as well. It was the same commissioning editor. The Cruel Work one was me having a go at being free, self-publishing. So, and I got a designer who's again Northeast based at the time. So, and he knew a little bit about how to go about it. And so, yeah, the Cruel Work one was just having a go at something else, just trying. I'd like to do that again. I'd like to work for Batsford again. I'd like to do my own self-published one again one day when I've got a bit more time.
Yeah, that was. I was going to ask. Do you enjoy putting books together? Because that's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, yeah. You have to have like almost 2 years and when I did the Goldberg bit, I was fortunate that I didn't really have much else on, and the White Work one was slightly harder because I had a bit more, and I've got even more responsibility. So it would have to be over a 2 year stretch for me to get anywhere near doing anything for a full book. So it is a lot of work because you can't just drop everything else.
Right. Yeah.
You're not earning while you're writing a book because and you don't really earn a huge amount from publishing anyway. But it's a massive publicity. It's just the best advertising to some extent.
Yeah, people have that perception that if you publish a book that you make a bunch of money off of it. And I've never talked to anyone who would say, other than, novelists who make, the famous novelists, but, people who do this kind of stuff. Yeah, I've never talked to anyone who could say, yeah, oh yeah, I made a killing. I'm rich off of this. It doesn't happen.
No, I don't think so. Well, not from my point of view anyway. But it was a really good fast track to just getting freelance. I just got lots of bookings from it, from my Goldwork one especially, and then the White Work one was slightly different, but I think it's done reasonably well as well. The Cruel Work one is much more probably advanced, because it's a little bit more considered as well, and it's much more from my point of view. It's much more picture based rather than written. There's a lot of criteria that you have to do for books because they have you have to do so many words, so many images, etc., etc. So you have to. I only know this from Batsford anyway. I haven't been involved with any other publishers as such, only one other, but I was just a supplement in it. So but yeah, they're good, but they're a lot of work. But as long as people realize it's not a money making thing, it's much more an advertisement. Yeah.
If you were going to do another one, would it be a project book or would you take a different approach?
I'm not really into project books, but I know that they have to be in the book. I'm much more about technique, so sampling and technique. That's kind of where I'm. I don't know if you've seen a copy of my Cruel Work book, but it's all about really pushing the boundaries of a technique such as French knots. Not just doing a French knot, but exploring those French knots, making them in clusters or putting multiple threads in the needle or spreading color or merging color or using bright color or dull color or making really thick French knots to thin French knots, spreading them out. It was much more about that sort of approach. And that's the sort of thing that I really like doing, which kind of almost borders the whole textile art thing, I think. So I like to push boundaries if I can. I always think about how things could be turned around a little bit. I like to think in a contemporary way if I can.
Yeah. Well, I've not seen the Cruel Work book, but you just sold a copy, so.
Okay.
Probably two there. I belong to an art quilt group, and we're trying. My goal in the group is to get them to do needlework on some of their quilts. Some of them just need a little more texture. They're very flat. And I'm like, if you added a few French nuts, that would just really make a difference. And, and I'm thinking, if I had that book and could show them, I bet I could sell a few copies. Because it would just, that's what people need. They need that visual. What do you mean? How do you, when you say I'm going to add French knots or add some texture to your piece, they need a visual. And
Yeah.
it seems like bouncing off.
But they don't tell you how to use a French knot. So that's kind of that was my approach. And not just French knots, bullion knots, laid work, trellis work. I didn't get around to doing every stitch, but I started to explore it a little bit. When I've got time, I kind of still, and I do it with gold work and white work as well. I'm very much into those techniques too at the minute. And I'd like to try other techniques as well. In time, I'd like to just try. I just have many ideas, always many ideas, and no time.
Do you write your ideas down in a notebook? Do you keep a sketchbook? Do you do it on a computer? I'm always curious about that.
I use Pinterest a lot as for ideas, so I kind of collect things from there. Sometimes I manage to do the teaching, and I kind of form it from there because it's kind of it sort of evolves from something that I'm doing, so I don't really think about it up front. But I do something, I teach something, and then I have an idea from there and try it. Then I have an idea from there and try it. So I have it kind of on a frame somewhere, or my little kind of goes at having it, from one technique to another. I just kind of just pursue. Evolve is kind of a word for me. I just evolve everything. I kind of teach in that way as well. I just let things evolve rather than plan. Sometimes you have to plan a little bit, but evolving is actually probably an easier way to approach it, because you've got already some ideas that you've tried, so you can just evolve from that. Whereas if you think about ideas up front, I hope I'm making sense. Writing it down sometimes doesn't make sense for me, but I just evolve everything.
So do you keep a doodle cloth then that you kind of that you say, oh, I have this idea, and you try to work it out on the cloth?
Yeah, I've got frames set up. So when I've been teaching online for mainly the Roscoe needlework and just doing things generally, I've just added to those frames. So I've got all these frames set up all over the place, and I haven't collapsed them. They're just there for me to add more to. So I just do that, even if just a little bit, just to kind of get going. I even get it from students as well. So students, when I'm teaching them, I have an idea and we go with it, and if it works for them, then I have images from their work. So it's I get it from students as well that I'm teaching, just a bounce. When you're teaching and they have ideas and you just bounce off each other, it's always quite good. That's what I like about teaching, really. The learning that you get back from being a teacher is just one of the best things.
Yeah, a lot of truth to that. You just painted a picture of your studio that makes me want to just go there and spend days. Just frames set up everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, my house is the same. It's just full of stuff.
Meaning you couldn't share house with someone else anymore?
No, I need a storeroom, basically. That's what I really need.
She shed, Gary.
Yeah, a she shed. Yes.
Yeah, just a massive store.
When you have so many techniques at your disposal, does that, like when you approach a design, I mean, does it kind of make it difficult? What technique to use, or when it comes to a design that pops into your head, do you see the technique right away? What does that? Because I just wonder if you can do so many well, if that kind of gets in the way at times.
Yeah, it's a really difficult question to answer. It depends what it is, because normally, because I have a lot of students come in my studio and I teach them, some of them come in and say, I want to do this. And it's a design, and sometimes it's really obvious how it's going to be worked. Maybe it's a applique or gold work, but quite often they say they want to do certain techniques. if I'm because again I was working at the cathedral, and we have to do sometimes we do new stuff and sometimes we just repair stuff. But when we do get new stuff, it becomes obvious the technique that we need to do it. Um, Another commission work that I've had, not that I do a lot of commission work, but it you kind of have an idea of how it's going to be. It tends to be applique based design, but with detail in stitch and maybe gold as well. That's normally how I approach things. Otherwise, as I say, the sampling thing that I do, I just do it for the sake of sampling and for no other reason. For it's not there for a design. It's just to sample, just to really explore. And I think that helps stretch my mind a little bit. And maybe one day I'll use those samples, but just sampling alone. There's old samples where you just see techniques just all over, and they're not planned. They're just a lot of different ideas on a frame. I really like that sort of thing. I just really like to. They're like they're just like little kind of tastes of different things. So you can explore something quickly, and then you can move on and do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So where you wouldn't have time or you wouldn't do it on a design as such, because it just wouldn't. You wouldn't be able to express your ideas of sampling on every design. I guess you could somehow, but I just love sampling. I do.
So
I think,
basically, you have these frames set up all over the place, and they're effectively artist sketchbooks. Then,
yeah. I sent you some images so
yeah.
you could. One of them was particularly messy because it was just all the threads all over, and that's basically what I wanted to show you. So you could see that particular frame. It was crewel work, and it's the online teaching I'm doing for the Royal School Needlework. And I sample because I camera share, and they can see my my approach to some of their elements on their design. And I really love those frames. That to me, those frames are more interesting than a finished piece of work that's just mounted and put on a wall in a frame. I know when I've been around graduate shows, degree shows at Royal College of Art and Goldsmiths and various other notable colleges in the Northeast as well as London and around the country. And it's really interesting when you go around a graduate show. They've got all their samples, but they've also got their notebooks sometimes as well that you can flick through, and they're actually much more interesting. Their processes. I know you put that on a list of things that you mentioned earlier, but the process, the thinking, the sampling is always really interesting to me, much more than the finished piece, because you might discard something, but you might still like the sample that you did. But you would never have done that sample had it not been for that design. But it's just so nice to have those samples and just to see the approach that could be. I guess another idea is the certificate on the Royal School Needlework, the crewel work. I think for the most part, most people go with the bog standard stitches and the bog standard way. And obviously that is important, and making those fit and making that work and the technique and the precision, etc. works. But sometimes they don't get the chance to maybe, especially because it's the beginning of the course, get the chance to really explore different ideas. If they did it all again, it would be much different, I guess. That's the way I can see it sometimes.
Yeah, I was talking to a lady some time ago, and I asked about another lady who highly respected, very skilled, and the lady I was talking to, she said, yeah, she starts a ton of things, but she never finishes anything. She just likes to do the process, and that spoke to me. It's like, yeah, I relate to that. Just it is the I mean, that's the way I feel about it. I don't get all bent out of shape if I don't finish something. It's just fun to just work on it. Yeah.
Yeah. I like most embroiderers, you have like the unfinished piece, but mine are just samplers on frames. I might just keep them on those frames forever. I I I really like on the degree program at the Royal School of Needlework how they frame up and do lots of little samples, and that's basically their finished piece. A finished piece can be a lot of samples. It doesn't have to be a finished picture that's mounted and put in a frame on a wall. A finished piece could just be a lot of samples still in the frame. That's where I see it.
Yeah.
This conversation with somebody before. And yeah, it's just I just find all those it's just when I look back through my samples, I get quite inspired by them. And I use them as a resource for teaching as well. And I know other people get inspired and do their own approach in the same way. And that's always interesting.
Yeah. Talk about your studio. Just reading about that, working in an artist community like that, that's got to be a day full of inspiration, I would think, a lot of interaction with artists that do other types of art.
Yeah. I mean, we do. It's called Fowler's Yard, and it's in Durham City, right by the river. The back wall of our studios is the river, which is really nice. And honestly, it's one of the best things that's ever happened to me. I still get a buzz every time I go to my studio. It's just one of the best things to have a studio that big with a mezzanine floor. In a space that I can teach in the heart of a city, right near the railway station, which is the main line from Edinburgh to London. I mean, what more could I ask for? It's and it has damp and stuff like that, but honestly, it's still great. I would never give that up. But yeah, it's there's a few artists, and I've been there one of the longest now. I've been there 20 years next year. And I think most of us have been there 10 years plus anyway. It's there's 7 studios, and then there's the cottages as well. And there's a goldsmith, a printmaker, an illustrator, a brewer. There's an empty studio as well, so we're waiting in anticipation to see who comes there. But a lot of people have come and gone. We all have our own front door that we lock, so we're not in and out of each other's studios. We don't have to walk through each other's studios. So sometimes there's interaction and sometimes there isn't. And sometimes it's just we all pay our rent to the same council. So normally the conversation is about that. But we do it is nice to be in that area. We have that in common, basically, the whole kind of rental thing, but we tend to work quite solo, I guess. We share the same toilet block, so you kind of meet everybody going in and out of the toilet block. But it is great. It is great.
Don't have like an open house where everyone kind of shows what they're doing once a year, anything like that going on?
Not really, I guess, because we're all very, very different, and we don't really maybe necessarily understand each other's world because it's so different to our own. I know, and it sounds like I'm that we never speak to each other, but we do. But we don't necessarily combine our skills. We just, I guess, because we're all quite fortunate that we're quite successful in our own little way. So, and we do like being next to each other, but we're not necessarily in each other's studios. As I say, it tends to be talking about what's happening with the empty studio, or have you heard from the council about this and that sort of thing. it's much more that sort of relationship that we have. But we do have like meetings and stuff together, but we don't collaborate necessarily, just because we're so busy in our own little worlds. But it is good. It is a really good community. It is one. It is. If you look at pictures of Fowler's Yard, it looks really quaint. And we've got a really nice coffee shop opposite us as well.
I saw that coffee shop. I thought, okay, go to the studio. I can go get a cup of coffee.
We've all got that coffee shop in common as well. Yeah, that's a really good coffee shop. Yeah, and the river. There's a lot of kind of, because Durham is quite a small city, in comparison to other cities around the UK. It's there's anything that goes on in the city kind of encompasses us a little bit as well. Like there's Lumiere, which happens every other year, which will happen next year, I think. And then we have the Miners' Gala, which is a tradition in Durham. And that's obviously not happened for the last few years because of the pandemic, but that also encompasses the city. They have the Brass Festival, and they do various things, and it's just really, you feel like you're part of the whole city compared to London, where it would you would only feel it if you were in a particular part of London because it's so sprawling. Durham is very compact, so as soon as you're out of the city, you see fields and villages and stuff. It's just a really tight city with a beautiful cathedral at the top of it.
Yeah, that cathedral, holy smokes, that thing is amazing. That and then you're the head broderer. Tell about all of that. Phil, I have no idea what all that means. I mean, the cathedral alone, just to be involved in that in any way, has got to be such an honor.
Yeah, it is. Because I'm from Durham anyway, and there were two other ladies who have since passed away that used to run the broderers at the cathedral, and they knew that they would have to retire at some point, and so they kept asking me when I was actually working in London if I would be interested, and it just wasn't right at that moment because I'd even considered leaving the Royal School of Needlework. But then when I did, I thought, yeah, I'm going to take up this challenge, and I've been there since I think just over 10 years now as head broderer. So it just kind of, like I said, the word evolved before, it just evolved. So I just became head broderer. Now you would have to do it in such a different way. You would have to apply. You would have to, and I just came in basically and just took over. But you have to apply, to do safeguarding courses and stuff like that. So it's, and I inherited probably nearly 20 broderers at the time. So I had to get used to, and I knew some of them anyway from Embroiderers Guild and that sort of thing, and teaching in my studio. But I had to, you had to get used to each other and work with each other, and I was the youngest. So they had to get used to me and the responsibility that I took on and the commissions that came in through Dean and Chapter. So, step by step, it just kind of, you get more and more comfortable and you kind of know the boundaries, and it's a smaller team now, which is better because otherwise you're just managing people all the time. Not to say that they were all really great in their own way, but it's much better how it is now. We've got two kind of main projects kind of vaguely on the go, which had to stop because of COVID, and then we were eventually allowed back into the cathedral. They were very strict about things, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
But now we're kind of just picking up the pace again, and yeah, so it's good. It's
So what do you actually do? Is it restoration? Is it creating new pieces? Is it? An ongoing list of things to be done?
I think initially, before I came along, they wouldn't do any kind of mending, but I'm happy to do mending. So we do like light repairs and things like that, or we overhaul things sometimes. Um, if there are big commissions in the offering, they come through dean and chapter. Everything has to fit. In that Church of England sort of way. So and then it has to go through a board and everything. And so we have got to kind of basic commissions on the way. We've got possibly another couple coming in, but we're even myself, we're basically volunteers. So we're not there full time. We're there kind of once every fortnight, and if the work kind of escalates, we'll probably come in a little bit more. So it's quite a lot of work, but it's slow paced, so it's not overbearing for me at the minute. Anyway, it has been in the past where we just had to get things finished, so we just worked a little bit more. But at the minute, it's just quite nicely paced. So that's how it is.
Is it kneeling pads, altar pieces?
Bit of everything. We at the minute, what we've got, there's a shop inside the cathedral. Obviously, all cathedrals do have shops. Somebody in the cathedral who kind of managed the shop asked if the brothers would make a cushion. So this cushion's been in production for quite a few years because it's all needlepoint canvas work. And we took the design from the marble floor in the high altar. So that's almost kind of at the end. It'll be finished probably into next year. And then that'll go in the shop. And the idea is that people sit on it, but we're all kind of almost wanted to be a museum piece rather than people to sit on it. But that was the idea, is that's how it was going to be. And then the other thing, the cathedral has its own museum. It used to be called Open Treasure, but it's called the museum now, I think. They've always had that sort of thing. It's like a treasury, and you pay to go in. It's the only part that you pay a fee to go in. Everything else is a donation. So you and you go and see all the artifacts of the cathedral, like St. Cuthbert's pictorial cross and his stolen maniple and that sort of thing, which are, very old and need to be safeguarded and protected. And inside the museum, they've got a cope chest, and they asked if we would make something for the cope chest. So we're going to make a cope based on St. Cuthbert's life, because obviously he is the saint that is probably more renowned in Durham. So around the hem, it's going to have 16 panels of his life from his when he started to become a monk, right the way through to his death and his resting place, which is Durham Cathedral, and the Lindisfarne Gospels and all of that sort of thing. And then St. Cuthbert's cross is quite renowned in the north of England. It's a bit like my logo. It's very similar to my logo. So that's going to be on the hood of the cope. So this is all kind of we've done quite a lot of the panels. It's just kind of bringing all the other bits in. We're working on the hood at the minute, and then we'll bring all the other parts together, and then we'll make it into the cope. Then it'll eventually go into the cope chest. At the minute, in the cope chest is a paper mock-up and some of the samples that we've done, so people can see the process. So they can just see the samples at the minute, and eventually those samples will come out and be made into maybe a book. Mm-hmm. And then you'll see the final cope in there. But the cope is made for display and not for wearing.
Yeah. Is that a challenge if you have so many people involved in a project like that so that it looks like it all belongs together? I mean, you must have people all of pretty equal high skill.
Yeah, I mean it has worked so far. All the panels that have been worked are all because I drew them out. I drew them all and designed them all. So they I tried to make sure that they looked as though they were connected. And then the approach, because I kind of oversaw we had other volunteers coming in to do the panels because it was probably too much for the broderers. So I oversaw a lot of it as it was going on. So fortunately it does work okay. So it's worked out fine so far. And I just oversee it all the time, so I can just make sure that it all works. It's a bit like the seat for the cushion for the shop. There's been everything evolved from there as well, because I had to grid out the pattern, which was based on the marbled floor, and we kind of just put the framework in first. Then after that, everything could just be flood filled. Mm-hmm. And that worked out really well. And as a team, there's a few of them that kind of really took to the canvas, and they worked really well as a team. And just little things like getting the colours ready, and the needles. They would just have a needle threading session, so they could thread up lots of needles in one particular colour. They had maybe 4 different thread colours that they had to use. So they would just thread up. So rather than just taking a bit of thread and then threading it up, they had everything ready to go, so they could just work as a team. It was really good. That's one of the best things about it, the kind of teamwork that they put together. And it just as you're working on it, it becomes apparent what would be the best approach. Why don't you do it like this rather than like that? Why don't you thread all these needles up rather than just thread them as you go? And that was really good. It's still working today, so yeah.
And you're actually going to let people sit on that? I wouldn't. No.
I know. I think when it goes into the shop, people probably won't sit. You might have the odd person, but I don't think you really get that many people sitting on it. If you knew the nature of the shop, people just kind of browse around. Uh-huh. You might get somebody just sitting, maybe just checking out one of the books, maybe in a quiet moment. But I don't think it's right at the back of the shop, so it's. I don't think it's going to happen too many times.
I'd have a big sign on there, not a seat.
I know. I know. It looks really impressive, this cushion, I have to say. It does look really impressive.
All right, so we're going to run out of time here. So in terms of your business, we're offering classes there at the studio, online. You're doing Royal School teaching. What all do you have going on now?
Yeah, mainly teaching online, teaching one-to-one, teaching in my studio. Coming to Fredericksburg, I think there's a few spaces there at the minute, but it's only just gone out. If you want to start, if anyone's interested in starting the certificate with the Royal School of Needlework, we're coming over. It's almost easier to do it face to face than doing it online. Online's good though. It's a really good follow-up as well. If you run out of time, you have it's just again one of these things from COVID. Didn't know that it would work, and it's worked. Mm-hmm. So yeah, lots of teaching. I'm going to get a new website soon as well, because I got a grant, or part of a grant. So I'm going to develop my website soon as well, because it's a little bit old. And my website is basically just an advert for me, but I actually want it to be a tool for me as well. So you can hopefully book things through it and that sort of thing. I've got many ideas, and I haven't really formed much opinion yet, but eventually you can kind of see it grow. I'm on social media, Instagram, Facebook page, that sort of thing. As is the broderers, which I kind of manage as well. Durham Cathedral broderers are on Instagram too.
Yeah, I'll have to find. You have to get a link for that. I don't have a link for that, but we'll have to put that in the show notes for the cathedral, because that thing is, oh, I must say I had to drool a little bit over those pictures of the cathedral. I just love that old architecture. I really do.
There's been many a documentary about it. So yeah, it is. I think you could. Yeah, they're very interactive as well. Durham Cathedral. I think they try and reach out around the world. Very much so.
Yeah, impressive stuff. Well, Tracy, thanks so much. This has been a lot of fun. Appreciate you sharing and your work. Really enjoy it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
All right, and thanks to everyone for listening.